Chad, do we have any more questions? I've seen a few pop up, but I can't see them fully here from there.
We sure do. We have a question from Jorge, who says, it's been reported in the local press that one of the demands that protesters have is a constitutional assembly in order to write a new constitution. Is your sense that this is a priority among people you came in contact with?
My sense was that, I mean, I think that, there were definitely lots of people demanding a new constitution. But I think every person that, you talk to at a protest has a different reason for being there and a different demand and a different priority. And it kind of depends on what, what region they're from. It depends on, I think earlier on, there was so much of, the focus kind of shifted as protests continued, I feel like, as well. But there definitely, I mean, that was one of the demands that I just think about this one, really the largest kind of first large protest we saw in Lima. I think it was January 19th. The signs basically that everyone was holding mentioned, the resignation of Dina Boluarte, the dissolution of Congress, and the new constitution. Those were really sort of the main demands. And yeah, so it came up a lot, but I think it really depends on who you talk to and what their priority was.
Yeah, I think that I think that protesters, mostly in the South, they are demanding a new constitution. The problem is that in Lima, people, the people in Lima are not so happy about all this situation because the economy is getting worse, and they feel also that a new constitution, we have the example, they say that the example is Chile, where they, after a big turmoil, political turmoil, they vote for a new constitution. They work in a new constitution almost for 1 year, and then people vote against that constitution. So lots of people in mostly Lima doubt about that solution, that is not going to be the solution of this conflict. So as Samantha said, it all depends of who you talk. If you talk to people in Lima, probably, or people in the north, you have another idea of what is going on. If you go to the south, for sure, people are demanding a new constitution.
Just quickly, I'd say a lot of people, were asking for it, but I think the number one I encountered always was just the president resigning. That seemed to be everyone's number one, was Dina Boluarte's resignation.
Yeah, and that is also an interesting point about, because Dina Boluarte is also Quechua. She has indigenous roots. So, and the people in the south think that she's working for the powerful people in Lima, not for them. So it's interesting. It's probably the first woman president of the country. She has an indigenous root. At the same time, people want her to renounce. So it's a big tragedy. the whole thing. It's very chaotic. It's sad.
Yes, and she never really had much of a chance, right? The way she came into power in that sort of vacuum after Castillo. She was always going to be the sort of target of everyone's anger about Castillo's impeachment and arrest.
And I guess to bounce off that, what Rodrigo said about her being Quechua, something that came up a lot in the South is that they felt, a lot of people felt more betrayed by that. That they were like, oh, she was supposed to be one of us, and then now we have all these protesters who've been killed when she came into power. So that was also just an interesting element of it.
Thanks, guys. Chad, I saw a couple more pop up in the
Yes. We have a question from Jennifer, who asks, how have international responses and actors affected protesters, if at all?
I think at the time I was there, they felt that there really wasn't enough of a response. That I don't know how protesters would feel today. I was there in, late January, but they felt that, and especially when I would mention that I was working for a US newspaper, they would say, why isn't the US doing more? And I think that there was a feeling that there wasn't a very kind of forceful response. and, especially to the deaths and to the, to human rights concerns in the country. And so that was part of the reason, at least, when I was there, what the message they were trying to send from, Machu Picchu and from these strikes is to try to get the attention of international actors, in part because they don't trust anyone in their own country. That really, as we mentioned, the institutions, across the board, did not inspire much confidence.
There was quite a divided reaction from some of the international community, right? There was some around Latin America who were very critical and remained very critical of Boluarte. Others who were obviously a lot more guarded and cautious with their early statements in terms of sort of supporting her presidency and trying to support stability. Alex, Rodrigo, anything you sort of see from that? I mean, obviously we had Mexico, Colombia very critical, the US, European countries obviously more sort of in support of her with warnings about the violence.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, here Boric here kind of criticized the crackdown on protests. In terms of, sorry, I guess I didn't. What was your question?
No, just in terms of what you saw on the ground, as in were people crossed angry that some global powers have been relatively supportive of Boluarte, and I suppose others have been more critical. But there was a sort of a consensus early on to kind of try and get behind her a little bit in terms of avoiding total meltdown.
It was interesting. I guess most of the people I encountered didn't kind of mention foreign powers. They mostly mentioned foreign organizations. They, like Sam said, they wanted, the OAS to come in. They wanted the UN to come in. They were asking why these organizations weren't coming in. I didn't necessarily hear much about specific countries, but yeah, it was more like, yeah, why isn't there more of a international response from these organizations? And that's kind of also why they were more willing to talk to us, because they were saying that if their stories got out, it would be more likely that these organizations would kind of take their case and intervene.
Thank you, Alex.